permit and where it stands in the connection between three of our major sections, the planning section, permitting section, compliance section. It is obviously the product that we write for a facility. It's based on the rules that the planning section adopts through this body, and it is the compliance tool that is used by our division to ensure compliance for our facilities. But why do we permit? The simple answer is the rules require it. Both the North Carolina general statutes and the federal Title V program dictate why we have to permit. The state construction operating permit, those procedures are located in the 2Q 300 section of the rules, and those are rules that are all part of our state implementation plan. The federal rules, the Title V, are found in 2Q 500, and those are all the procedures. I know here that North Carolina is an approved state. What that means is the rules that this body has approved and adopted have also been vetted and approved by EPA. So they have given us approval to run the Title V program in North Carolina. What is a permit? The permit is simply, it's the document that we issue to a permittee for the operation of their facility. And it is dictated by the thresholds of that facility. It contains specific general permitting conditions that allow both the construction and operation of air emitting sources and their air pollution controls. Each of those specific conditions are tailored to that equipment, both in the pollutants and the operating parameters. It can be a combination of both state and federal conditions. We have sets of general conditions that will apply to a permitting class, depending on whether you're Title V or non-Title V. And it is the document in which the permittee is required to abide by to show compliance. What do the specific conditions include? This framework is generally how you would see our Title V permits, but the same practice applies to our non-Title V. Specific conditions include, obviously, the emission limits for those pollutants and standards. It can be a combination of general testing or more specific testing, date certain testing, parameter testing, temperature, whatever the case may be. It is a collection of monitoring requirements, whether that be simply inspection and maintenance requirements or operating parameters, thou shalt, whatever. Obviously, record keeping requirements and reporting requirements. Again, the applicable regulations are a combination of both those that are adopted as part of our SIP, as well as those that we have been granted delegation to apply. Examples include, again, those that are part of the SIP, some state enforceable only, like our North Carolina Air Toxics program and odor are a good example of those. And the federal rules, the maximum achievable control, generally available control, and new source performance standard. Those are all federal programs which can mostly apply to Title V, but some can apply to our non-Title V class as well. So how is the permitting done in North Carolina? The Division of Air Quality, as you may already know, has 7 regional offices and a central office location. Central office here in Raleigh does all the permitting for the Title V class and the PSD, Prevention of Significant Deterioration class, statewide. The 7 regional offices noted by those pins do the all the permitting for the non-Title V, the smalls and the synthetic minors, and I'll talk about those a little bit in a minute. And as Steve will point out, those 7 regional offices are also the inspection arm statewide. North Carolina also has 3 local programs: Buncombe County, Forsyth County, and Mecklenburg County. Those are independent states, for lack of better words, within North Carolina. They've adopted the same sets of rules that parallel those that are adopted by this body. They implement, permit, and enforce for their facilities within their county borders. This is just the org chart for my section. The names aren't important there. What I want to draw your attention to are those that are in yellow and red. Those are in yellow, the positions that I currently have vacant. We have been in flux for quite a number of years trying to come up to full staff. And that leads to the red. Those are the ones that have announced their retirement for this year. As you can see, one of my supervisors in the new source review is one of those. I am happy to say that the other 2 supervisors have both been promoted this year. So I will have a complete set of new supervisors by the end of this year. So that does add to a little bit of delay, actually. I have supervisors who are still writing permits to cover for the loss of some engineers. Yes, sir. I'm down the 4 yellows currently. 1 E3, which we have interviewed for. That one will be a chemical specialist that will be heading up our PFAS section, emerging compounds, and then 2 E2s, one due to promotion and one due to resignation, left for greener pastures, and then a meteorologist. Yep, that's everybody. And that's the current state. It looked worse a couple months ago. A little bit about the facility classifications. I'll start with the Title V. That's what we call our major permitters. Those have the potential over 100 tons of a single criteria pollutant, or 10 tons of an individual HAP, 25 tons of a combination of HAPs. If you're not one of those, you're a small facility. Your potential is less than those cutoffs. The synthetic minor is a hybrid permit. Those facilities are every bit as large and complex as a Title V facility, but they have chosen to take permit restrictions to avoid the Title V program. So they get their own special permit. And then the slide talks about how do you define your potential. It's your maximum capacity to emit, 8,760 hours per year, taking into any kind of limitations, whether it be physical or operational, the addition of air pollution control equipment, hours, or whatever the case may be. North Carolina's current facility counts as of last week. You see the breakdown. We permit roughly 1,700 facilities in that breakdown. The other 1,000 facilities there that are registered or exempt, those were previously permitted facilities in North Carolina who got to take advantage of a rule modification that based their ability to be either exempt or registered based on their historical actual emissions. They could request based on those numbers to get out of the permitting process and become a registered or an exempt facility. And this was for the other bullet points there are just mainly for DAQ employees for the onboarding, but we assign each facility an individual identification number based on its county and an individual permit number that stays with them for life. This is just a simple graph of what's that, 2015? I forgot my glasses as well. Through 2022, Title V trends Not important again about the slope up and down. What's important to me as supervisor is that that dark blue line be above the green line, meaning that I'm actually getting to permit and tackle some of our backlog of applications. EPA defines backlog for Title V purposes as an application that's been in-house, been in process for more than 18 months. And we have about 40 of those right now. Geographically, our Title V population is spread pretty evenly throughout the state. Those are represented here by the purple dots. I did not include a slide for the smalls and synthetic miners, but you can see where they're clustered along the major interstates and along our ports. A little bit about timelines. The non-Title V, the smalls and synthetic miners fall under our construction and operating program. Again, most of those applications are required statutorily to be issued within 90 days of determination of a complete application. For Title V, the timelines are a little bit longer. We've got, in some cases, up to 18 months to issue permits. And then for some of the smaller minor modifications, again, 90 days. And then PSD, which is the largest of the large facilities in North Carolina, if they go through that PSD program for a modification, we've got a year from determination of a complete application to issue those permits. So while an applicant is waiting for their permit, we typically get asked, what can I do while I'm waiting? The general statutes and our rules provide that, and that's what's listed here. They can do simple clearing and grading. They can do some access roads, driveways, some utilities to the site, and ancillary structures that are unassociated with the air emitting sources. One thing I do want to note is that we're watching this very closely, this legislative session. There is a possibility of this list being expanded in some ways. So we're watching that expansion because this statute is codified under our definition of construction. Would require any expansion would most likely require that this body review those rules as well. The number of applications, again, this is just a screenshot capture of one of our Power BI reports, and it shows the current workload throughout the state, 289 total applications, and you can see the majority of those fall under the Title V, where I've got 214 active applications, and that's shown in that graph there, as well as the distribution among the 7 regional offices, how the breakdown appears. So now I'm going to spend a few moments to talk about the environmental justice. I really should change this slide, and it's the enhanced public outreach program, which environmental justice is just one part of. Currently, the rules don't require that every one of our permits go to public notice before they're issued. In fact, for Title V, only those that are being renewed or are significant modifications are required to go to notice. And then for smalls and synthetic miners, none are required to go to notice unless there's a director's discretion, and that's by rule. So what this enhanced public outreach does is it expands that those numbers. One part of it is the environmental justice piece, and that's defined there. Each division was required to establish triggering applications that would go through this enhanced public outreach process. For air quality, we've chosen new or greenfield Title V facilities, those that come in as Title V, or those that grow into Title V, whether they be a small or a synthetic miner. Any PSD modification, and then finally the division director's discretion for any application that may have significant public interest. We'll take through the process. And that link there, if you go to it, just shows examples of some of the EJ reviews that have been done in the past. What the department EJ's team does is uses a tool. It's based off of EPA's EJ screen. And it just layers the demographics. They put a pin in the applicant at the address, draw a circle around it, and they look to see what's inside that circle. And based on what's inside that circle, they can make enhanced community outreach recommendations that both the division and or the department would do to communicate this application and the draft permit out to the public, whether it be translating materials, fact sheets, a full-blown environmental justice report, going and doing mailers, leaving things door to door, those kind of things. So those are all recommendations that the department recommends based on, again, what is inside that circle around that facility. This is just a flow chart of the process. So once you've got one of those triggering applications, you come into the system. If EJ is determined to be triggered, you go to the top half where an EJ report is created. It becomes one of the draft documents that go out to the public. And we hold a public, at least a minimum of a 30-day comment period, may hold a public hearing, and then we take final action. If EJ is not triggered, the permit still goes through that 30-day comment period with a chance for public hearing. It just doesn't have the EJ component. And finally, this graph is just to show how much recently, either through the implementation of the enhanced outreach or just generally the public and third parties paying more attention to our permits, we have seen a drastic increase in the number of permits that we have either taken out the public comment period or taken to public hearing. And of course, as this graph shows, it's drastically ramped up over the years. And all of that effort could add delay to the permitting process, but it definitely requires a lot of coordination between the department and local communities, schedule hearings and things like that. So that in a nutshell is what we do in permitting, what I do here in Title V in Raleigh. These are my supervisor's contacts, and available for any questions you may have. Booker Rahul was recently promoted from an E3 to the Title V supervisor, so I hope he's not going anywhere. Mark Yoder was recently promoted from one of our meteorologists to head that branch, and it's Booker that's retiring. He's in charge of our new source review section. He'll be a loss. Thank goodness Rahul knows just as much PSD, so I can have the help there. Yes, sir.
Thanks for that. But question I had was environmental justice.
I don't believe there is. I think it's just demographics. You know, it could be just simple listing of cases of whatever within that section, you know, known counts, for lack of better words. But no, I should point out that the EJ review is a non-technical review of the application, so it doesn't go into cumulative. It doesn't take into account, while it recognizes there are other facilities in the area, it doesn't request anything of us to do a technical analysis of the cumulative effects or anything like that. We permit based on the merit of an individual facility's emissions profile. So no, to this point, it has not required us to seek advice from our sister agencies.
How much staff time is that?
So the EJ portion, the creation of the actual document, is done outside of air quality. It's done at the department level. So as soon as the application comes in and we let them know that we've got a triggering application, that starts their process so that their product and their recommendations can be ready by the time we have the draft permit ready to go to notice.
Not separate section.
No.
Say staff and how many report put together this information. Awareness, all the information. Not included. All put together. Related to that's not.
It is not a new thing, and rightly or wrongly, North Carolina is not alone. In Region 4, most states have some level of backlog. We're just, yeah. We look as supervisor staff, part of what I hope to do in my role as chief is to try to find enhancements or ways to shorten the processing timeline as well as promote consistency among all the permits that we write. So short of throwing bodies at it at this point, trying to get new staff up to speed. And the issue really, if I had to say why I have a backlog, is most of the backlog, probably about 50% of it, is our Title V renewals. And those, as long as an applicant submits them timely, they really can be put to the side. We still have an 18-month clock, but modifications, 90-day short-term applications where facilities really need those permits issued so that they can be construction and operating those new sources. Those sort of trump those renewals and they just get pushed down. Unfortunately, that's probably, if I had to guess why I have a backlog, it'd be because of that.
Well, and
Right.
Unless they're doing something different.
Correct. That's right. That's right. And those, we process those, usually a brand new source. We used our state construction operating permit program to get them going. So those are actually 90-day clocks. So those will trump again any 18-month clock permit application that I've got in-house.
I mentioned a few of it, and years try to get it, this, something decentralized, for our regional.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have, we've also, also taken the approach of combining applications.
Yes.
Facility that's a renewal.
Mm-hmm.
Then they submit 3 modification requests in close proximity to
Right.
ways to combine.
Mm-hmm.
Or from these 3
Right.
permitting that.
Right.
Not only possible.
Right.
Also, something.
So yeah, in addition to what you mentioned, we've also got some engineers that we consider dedicated renewal engineers. Then they don't have the pressure of a 90-day clock on them. They can just be machines, essentially. And I'm sorry, that's terrible. But one of the big points too that I'd like to, as far as timing, is no 2 renewals are the same. You could be renewing a power plant, and you can be renewing a bread manufacturer. It's completely different as far as timing is concerned. So, and we're at the mercy of when those applications come in and the number of staff. So we are always looking for ways to shorten timelines. But again, short of having full staff, I'm going to be in this predicament for a while. Yes, all smalls and synthetic miners are done at the regional office. And the way the rules are aligned as far as what Mike was speaking to is for expiration dates. Title V permits have a 5-year life. Smalls and synthetic miners have 8-year lives. So there's this natural progression of rotation that creates a lull at the regional office of incoming renewals. And it's during those time that if they have the bandwidth, I can farm out some of my Title V renewals to them.
Approach we've taken previously, more recently, not for them to take that.
Correct.
Due to same issue.
Yeah.
We've been so short on permitting staff. Taking permitting application flows from one office and shift it to another office that might be picked up. So things we've tried in the past aren't currently being used because of other issues.
Right.
Regarding the staffing and continuity. See that when we come around to the regional office, we get to know your business.
Yes, I just mentioned, again, the Title V has a 5-year, if that's what you mean, 5-year life from when a permit is issued. Synthetic miners and smalls have 8-year lives. Is that? Yes, yes, that's small vernacular, non-Title V, non-major facilities. Yeah. It's not routine to, again, analyze, do a technical analysis on an application or a facility and include a cumulative impact. Where that does come into play is if there's a director's discretion to do it. There was one recent example where there were 2 boat manufacturers in a tight area. We did look at the overall emissions of styrene in that example. The other example is the PSD program. If for those facilities that go through PSD, when they get to the modeling portion to show compliance with the NAAQS, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, that they do have to look at a radius around them to see what the air shed currently has available to it. So that is a pseudo cumulative look at that point, but no other applications do that.
Environmental justice can't struggle to take process you law and what we would be. So having potential time we want to add step acknowledging that body that there's that review of the draft. Okay.
Nothing new. We do modeling, we do air toxics modeling. I'm not familiar either.
Actually, we may talk a little bit more about PFAS in our next presentation. Later to there, certainly, PFAS is definitely part of certainly just the environment. We are absolutely looking at where there could be products or during the source category. Based on that, and take it from there. And so PFAS will certainly be a part of this committee within the labor committee today. So I'd say that regulatory perspective, science on the air side is lagging behind in water studies are being tested harmful later today. There's not so much on the inhalation side. That's a pattern you saw in all toxic selenium. We're eyes wide open and full awareness.
So, a couple of questions. One is for the categories of facilities that are now registration only, based on historical conditions. But typically, the permit would be involved for getting monitoring.
Right. Right.
How does that work with the registration only?
Right. So those allowances, whether to be registered or exempt, were limited to our non-Title V facilities. So they were the smalls. So permit exempt is just that. You don't hold anything. And Steve may speak to this a little bit about the compliance and inspection side of the house when it comes to those, but you are still on our radar. You still have an identification number. You are still susceptible to inspections. But you do have to keep records on site that if we do visit you, that show that you maintain those levels and are still eligible for those programs. Registration is just one step more. You actually hold a piece of paper. It's a pseudo permit, but not a full permit.
Another follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. Concerning that's a significant part of the environmental justice issue, and there is some North Carolina law that a consideration of human effects with respect to environmental. But the other vehicle for, in the past, for consideration of cumulative effects has often been an environmental impact statement. So is there any significant percentage of these permitted facilities that have to produce an environmental impact statement?
It's not part of the permit application material that we receive. So I'm really quite unsure who would be subject to those impact statements. I'd have to find that out myself.
I know the state thresholds have certainly changed significantly in the last number of years. And I wasn't sure how that worked in terms of the relationship between the federal permitting.
NEPA and SEPA.
Very loose connection. Again, in awareness of those impact statements of analysis when they're done, good for staff if they have an application on the desk. But it may not contain all of the technical detail that's necessary to go through the full evaluation.
And I guess I was thinking of it from the opposite perspective, which is that the EIS often captures information that is not technical permitting information, but information about social community impacts that aren't really reflected in the technical permitting. So to the extent that it's just a broader scope, not on technical issues, on community. One more couple questions, sort of related to that, so this is probably for later, but on the permit renewal, the Title V permit renewal, I will say if there's one takeaway from the recent experience with PFAS and violations, it's that renewals may be really important in terms of having that regular opportunity to look behind what's happening at
Right.
a facility, making sure you have all the information.
Right. And if you don't mind, in relation to that, we have recently, through the work of the department and the AG's office, created what we call a disclosure permit condition that we've included in a handful of permits at renewal. And what that does is they have either been found to be known users of PFAS, recipients of PFAS, emitters, either through the water or whatever the case may be. And through that process, Mike mentioned it, we have a set of handful of screening questions that we ask them. We put them on record, yes, no answers, listing of chemicals, et cetera, what the case may be. But we are including that disclosure state or permit condition, which requires of an applicant to, upon becoming aware, let us know to start that conversation with the department, with the division on the air side. And in fact, in addition to that, some more recent renewals, we've actually added testing conditions for incoming raw materials. So we're slowly getting those types of permit conditions more and more out there.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I think that's another point to stress in terms of the backlog of renewals. It's not just a benign thing. So, and Mr. Chairman, one last question, which again may be for later, and this may be more of Mr. Abruzitskas, but I was just curious that the other issue we've learned a lot more about in the last few years is the connection between air emissions of PFAS and ground treatment. So I wonder, is there anything happening at EA in terms of figuring out the relationship between air quality permitting and water to this water?
Most certainly, the air emissions pathway is an important potential groundwater violation or contamination down there. Certainly, we learned a lot about that here in North Carolina over the years. And we've shared a lot of that information with colleagues across the West, and we're learning from them. We're learning from each other. Like, how to identify them, with a general lack of methods or any. There's one approved EPA stack test method for a suite of PFAS contents currently. There's another one, another two under development and both very close. But all that to say is, yes, it is not talked about as much, but air emission pathway is a very important one. And so we are certainly integrating into our team, into the Department of PFAS Action Council, and the resources. We are very much at the table as part of that team. Absolutely a pathway forward. We've seen modest amounts of emissions to lead to significant downwind groundwater fires, not just in North Carolina. Our approach for identifying some of these are ambient situations of ambient air quality. That's difficult if there's no ambient air quality monitoring. But there's one thing we know for sure, and I mentioned this before, and so that's why we put out a network of air deposition monitors, collecting drinking water, high definition to downwind near the source in North Carolina. We also have a background. Our seven regional offices. We'll hear about that when we get to our ambient monitoring, very important topic. I appreciate you raising that. Chair Smith, again, I think air emission pathway is the least understood, the least talked about, but it could be the most important in some situations around one.
It also raises some really interesting legal questions about whether we have the right statutory language that would allow air quality permitting programs to be effective in reaching that impact. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Paul. Very service.
Concerned about keeping us in position still in that same way and
all right, so good morning, commissioners. My name is Steve Hall. I'm the Technical Services Section Chief, which is primarily the compliance arm of the division. Mark showed the graph, how the different sections kind of integrate together. And so most of the compliance and enforcement activities, our section oversees those. And but there are some other aspects, and I apologize, I have more slides than I have time, so I'm going to zoom through some of these and in order to be able to take any questions you might have. We basically have two branches of the technical services section, but we also have a couple of specialists whose duties I will talk about in a few slides. They report directly to me, as do the supervisors of the branches. This is the org chart for stationary source compliance and mobile source compliance. Gary Saunders supervises 12 staff, mostly engineers. Brian Phillips supervises 5 permanent staff, but ever since we've been working on the VW settlement program, he's had a full-time temporary staff. Additionally, it's not shown on this org chart. I will mention, I didn't highlight these, but if you look at the stationary source compliance side of the 13 shown there, I looked at this recently, and in about 2 years' time, I mean, some of them are already eligible for retirement, but in 2 years' time, 9 of the 13 will be eligible for retirement, either based on age or years of experience. So a lot of expertise, long time experience, but really precarious as far as potential for people leaving at the same time. So this is a chart that shows you a wide variety of activities we look into and duties we have in tech services. It's very varied, but I'll touch the highlights of these as we go along. Starting with mobile sources, one reason we look at mobile sources, have a unit looking at mobile sources, is they are significant contributors to air emissions in North Carolina. At the last full emission inventory, looking at all sectors, that was 2017. And just a side note, that's done every 3 years. They didn't do a full inventory in 2020 due to COVID not being a representative year. We should have a new one coming out shortly. But 2017, it was 50%, right around 50% of NOx emissions in the state were attributed to mobile sources. And the graph on the right shows some of the progress we've made looking at each 3-year inventory cycle in the reduction of both NOx, VOC, and along with VOC and carbon monoxide. So one of the programs we still have currently is the inspection and maintenance program for the emissions inspections that the blue counties shown here have to get conducted on an annual basis. These are light duty motor vehicles around the state. All light duty vehicles need to have this safety inspection, but the blue counties have to get the additional emissions inspection. And our folks in the mobile sources compliance branch work closely with DMV to implement that program throughout the state. We also have a vapor recovery program. This is looking at trying to ensure control of VOC emissions from gasoline service station and bulk fuel plants. These systems are designed to capture any vapors during the loading or offloading from a tanker truck into either an underground or above ground storage tank. Those systems are designed to capture those vapors back into one of the tanks. So we do inspections to ensure the components of these systems are maintained and the systems are in place and working. We also train our regional staff who do a lot of these inspections out in the more, outside of the Wake County general area. And we handle all the enforcement activities through technical services. We do several other things around mobile source. We work with partners in state, local, federal government with transportation conformity plans. We respond to smoking vehicle complaints. We're constantly, and particularly in a long session, looking at legislation affecting mobile sources and any rule changes that might affect mobile source compliance. And we're keeping an eye on alternative fuels and vehicles, both from a standpoint of how they fit into our compliance programs, but also for the other aspect of mobile sources, which is grants and incentives. And we've done a lot of grant incentive work over the years. We used to use some state funds to do some annual grants. Now we use federal funding through the DERA program. That's the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. We get funds from EPA every year to administer for grants around the state to basically replace older heavy-duty diesel vehicles and equipment with cleaner alternatives. And the number varies from year to year, but it's 1.4 million available after some matching funds we put in, 1.4 million available in 2022. And then a big project over the last few years has been the VW settlement, Volkswagen settlement program, where North Carolina, as a beneficiary of the national settlement, received $92 million to award to eligible projects. We did this in 2 phases. Phase 2's kind of been expanded, as I'll mention in a minute, but we're about a third of the money was awarded in phase 1, and the remaining 68 million was in the most recent phase 2. The VW program caps the amount of money that could be spent on zero emission vehicle charging infrastructure at 15%, and we're trying to maximize that number. And then the balance goes to similar projects as the DERA program, replacement of heavy-duty diesel vehicle and equipment. This shows this mainly is just to show you the targeted percentages at the beginning of phase 2 of the Volkswagen settlement program. The second to last column on the right kind of give you the relative percentages. The number amounts will show up again for the different program areas on the next few slides. Well, first I want to mention a very important part of the phase 2 program, and that was a outreach program we did for historically under-resourced counties in North Carolina. We went through a process of identifying which counties using different metrics, which counties are historically under-resourced. We also looked at the applications we received in phase 1 and saw that many of these counties identified did not submit applications. So we did some outreach, went out into the communities. Basically, these are counties that likely don't have dedicated staff that are used to doing grant applications and things like that. So we went out and made them aware of the opportunities through the VW settlement, and also provided resources that they might need to submit an application if they chose to. And so if we look, these next few slides kind of show really a success story of phase 2 awards. We go through the different program areas, and I've highlighted both projects in historically under-resourced counties with the acronym HURC, and also electric vehicles that went into that were awarded. For the school bus program, you can see we had about twice as much money requested as we had allocated. We were able to award a little more than was allocated due to some funds coming available from other programs. In total, 161 buses around the state. Half of those were in historically under-resourced counties, and 43 of those, which represents over half the money, were electric buses. Electric buses are about 4 to 5 times more expensive right now than new diesel buses. So the money's pretty equivalent, but the number of buses is less. Transit and shuttle bus program, you can see quite a bit of interest in this, particularly in the urban areas. 13.5 allocated, 35.5 requested. We funded all we could. That resulted in 49 new buses on the road, 13 of those electric. And really, the fact that we had 23 in historically under-resourced counties is pretty amazing, because usually this is a kind of a program that focuses on urban transportation, but it does have a shuttle bus element to it that we were able to utilize in these historically under-resourced counties. And some of them do have more urban areas. So. The Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle Program, we received actually less than we allocated for this program, and rolled that extra into the school bus program. But we were able to fund 45 new vehicles through this program in phase 2. 29 of those in historically under-resourced counties. Only 4 electric. The technology's a little behind in this area. Is coming along, but slower than in the area of, say, buses, transit buses, and school buses. And then looking at that 15% of the funds that we're allowed to put into zero emission infrastructure around the state, charging infrastructure, we had a lot of interest in the DC fast charging program. This is the fast chargers, the high voltage chargers that can fully charge a vehicle in about 20 to 30 minutes. So these are kind of more equivalent to pulling into a gas station, whereas the level 2 chargers are slower chargers. It might take a few hours to fully charge with a level 2 charger. So for these fast chargers, we were able to award, we had a little more than we allocated through some money that came from other places, but within the VW program. But we were able to put in 104 new ports around the state, and 43 of those in historically under-resourced counties. Then we also had through stakeholder involvement, we had an element of the program that was for upgrade of existing fast charging infrastructure, but we didn't receive as many applications for that as anticipated. We awarded all that we received. That's upgrading 16 new charging ports around the state, or upgrading 16 existing charging ports around the state. And then we had a special program in phase 2 for state agencies. Received $2.5 million in requests for $1 million allocated, and we're able to increase the electric vehicle infrastructure for state agencies by 103 ports, 22 in historically under-resourced counties. And just a note, we just released a last additional request for proposal to spend any leftover money in this program on state agency projects. So those applications will be taken through September 1st, and we look to spend the remaining $700,000 to $800,000 that we have on state agency projects. And the reason we have some leftover money is we had a first come, first serve rebate program for other level 2 charging. This is at kind of public attraction sites, workplaces, and multi-unit dwellings. And we didn't receive as many, the money we allocated in phase 1 went quickly. We didn't receive, even though it was open for several months, we didn't receive as much as we thought interest in this program. And so we've rolled any extra money from that and some other interest gained through the VW money being in an account for several years into this last state agency request for proposal. But we were able to get 463 new charging ports, level 2 charging ports awarded throughout the state, with 42 of those being in historically under-resourced counties. So switching to the stationary source compliance side, really a lot of the work in stationary source compliance is in the area of quality assurance, assuring that we're getting good quality emissions data, and also that our compliance data that we keep from our inspection programs and review and compliance reports is kept in a manner that is easily understandable, accessible, and also available to be directly uploaded to EPA's compliance and enforcement system. So we have groups of people who look at continuous emission monitoring systems around the state. That's the best possible emission data we can get. It's a lot of data points, and it's important that those systems are maintained and quality is assured. We review stack testing reports and protocols. Those are one-time tests, but very important information, and they're used for a variety of applications once they're completed. We also handle all the enforcement cases around the state. Actually, they're initiated through like a facility inspection program or other activities in the regional offices usually. And then they're put together, sent to our team, and we prepare them for Mike Abrazenskis to assess appropriate civil penalties in those cases. So we also have oversight of North Carolina's risk management program or accidental chemical release program. This is under section 112R of the Clean Air Act, and it's really designed to minimize the risk of some catastrophic release. We've talked about PFAS. We've spent a lot of time collaborating with multiple state and federal agencies on PFAS since we first discovered air deposition from Chemours was negatively impacting groundwater. We've helped with the development of new testing methodology. We've seen multiple stack tests at Chemours over the last few years, and lately we've expanded our research and activities into additional pollutants and targeting other facilities of other potential emitters of PFAS. Just some numbers, a quick few charts of some numbers of our inspections. This is our the main element of our compliance program is to get out on site and see these facilities and ensure they're complying with their air permits. If you look, we try to do our major and our Title V and synthetic minor facilities every year. The rest of the facilities we inspect, we try to get out there every other year. So our goal is around 1,740 full compliance evaluations each year. You can see pre-COVID, we were easily meeting and exceeding that. COVID took a hit, for obvious reasons. And then after that, we've kind of remained down a little bit, probably due to staffing more than anything else. But our focus has been on the Title V's, which are the purple, and the synthetic minors, which are the blue bar. And you can see that we've gotten back to pre-COVID levels for those inspections. This slide leads into the next slide, which is to show how many times a site visit of any kind produces a deficiency or violation letter. And a site visit in this case may be a specialized visit to look at one program area, say like the risk management program or 112R, or it might be a partial it might be a virtual inspection that we did during the COVID times. So you can see our activity remained high as far as visiting the sites, even during COVID, and particularly at our Title V and synthetic minor facilities. And this is our deficiency and violation rate. This is from those visits, how many times did we issue either a notice of deficiency or a notice of violation or a notice of recommendation for enforcement? And there's a little dip during the main COVID year, but the rest of the numbers are probably pretty typical, just noise in the data. These show our actual compliance letters issued over the last 5 years. Once again, total in green. This is notice of deficiencies in green, notices of violation in blue, and enforcement letters in purple. Those are the ones that will lead to civil penalty assessments generally. And so you can see the trend there, but the enforcement numbers have remained pretty steady over the last 5 years. And that's also shown in the green bars here. These are enforced actual civil penalty assessment cases. And those may differ a little bit from the previous slide because of timing. We may issue a letter and 6 months later in a different calendar year do the assessment. So, but you can also see that we spend quite a bit of time on open burning. Mike does a lot of assessments, civil penalty assessments for open burning violations around the state. And this is usually repeat violators or very egregious violators. And well over half of our assessments are for open burning cases. And that hasn't slowed down over the last 5 years. And this is just an indication of how many stack tests we review, both total and at synthetic, minor, and Title V facilities. Now, I mentioned those special positions that report directly to me. One of those positions has two primary roles. The first one is in technical skills training coordination for the entire division. And that's 200 staff, roughly, mostly engineering scientists that need to be trained well. And so we work with many partners to create a schedule of training opportunities throughout the year. We also leverage our internal expertise and experiences to offer in-house training. We utilize in-person, and especially during COVID, a lot of virtual courses. And we seek out new ideas from our staff to make sure that we're meeting their training needs. The same person is also in charge of our electronic records system administration. That's through Laserfish. And DAQ actually moved to an electronic records management system for all our public records in November of last year. This replaces a paper record system dating back to 1969. A lot of paper that needs to be transitioned into digital format, electronic format. And all new stuff we receive is automatically instant as soon as we receive it transitioned. And if y'all have seen through some things on the commission, we're trying to change our rules and our permits and deal with some federal obstacles that will allow us to receive all our records electronically from the very beginning. So the Laserfish administrator is a member of our team, but they work very closely with record custodians throughout the division and all our offices to develop processes, procedures, and make sure we're following state public record laws. So that's it for my presentation, my contact information here, and I'd be glad to take questions if we have time.
But Steve, when you register and there's an issue, how do we test that?
Okay. Yes, there's really a couple of ways we can do it, and it depends on the issue, obviously. But just because you qualify for the registration or the permit exemption, we could pull somebody back into a permit if we feel that's the best mechanism for ensure. We need monitoring, record keeping, reporting, and the best mechanism to do that is the permit. We could pull them back into the permit by director's decision. But sometimes, depending on the situation, we might just issue a compliance letter that's very clear about what we need them to do for some period of time and to get them back on track. And if it's something that can be resolved in a time frame, then maybe that's the best course without subjecting them to a long-term permit.
So is that, I guess for enforcement purposes, that the hook that you would use in a compliance letter as their example register?
Yep.
There's, until they have brought that into having to have a permit, taking further enforcement action, like that's all the table.
Well, yes, ma'am. We can certainly enforce on if we put a requirement into, let's say, a notice of the violation letter, and they don't meet that requirement, we can enforce based on what we put in that letter. So we're not limiting our enforcement abilities by going that route. It really just comes down to is this a long-term issue or is it a short-term issue?
Your enforcement policy applies.
Mhm.
Well, so, and it's important to know for restrictions that they have.
Yeah.
Still requirements.
If you just.
We would cite the federal regulation in the violation letter itself, or and the enforcement case as needed. Yes. No, concrete, I mean, we're probably a few years away from completing it. Even the projects we award, sometimes people back out and we have to figure out what to do with that extra money. A lot of the money on the clean, on the heavy duty side, project side, we're just kind of rolling into our DERA program, our annual DERA program. But at some point, we'll know exactly the final numbers for VW program, but we might be a couple of years out, but we're perfectly willing to share the success story and lessons learned with this board, or this commission, and or anyone else who needs it. And we do have 3 summer interns who are going through right now from Wake STEM Early College High School, who are looking at our phase 1 numbers and really trying to make, kind of crystallize them into a story that, that tells a good story about emission reductions and all we were in lessons learned. So we'll continue to do that through phase 2. And, I suspect, Mike, I don't know if you want to add, but we'll have some final report that can be shared.
Summary of footage, what we project possible. But it's important. Money hasn't been and prove it service and destroying the old remedial school bus, and we have to hold them accountable. So that's a long pathway. So yes, I do envision the final report. At least, have that in the report.
An open burning question.
Okay.
And I'll tell you where this is coming from. I've had occasion the last several years to spend a number of weekends in a county in North Carolina where I'm persuaded open burning is a primary recreational activity. There's a lot of it going on. I was just curious, and you may not know the answer to this, but I was curious whether state law has become much more permissive over the last several years about overburning, and the number of instances where prior permits required have been reduced. I was curious whether you've seen any correlation between the changes in law, which have made it easier for people to engage in open burning without prior permitting, and the number of violations you responded to.
Well, I need to look back a little further than that 5 years. I think we probably have seen maybe a bit of an increase if you look at data over the last 10 years prior to maybe the 10-year period before that. And we do have, we've reinstituted a team, an open burning outreach team, to try to kind of analyze some of those trends and do more outreach in certain areas that, particularly where there's violations. I mean, we can't do a whole lot about, where it's illegal open burning, but it's just, without, change in legislation. So, so I think one of the things that we'd like to do with our open burning outreach team is to get information out there in the communities. It might result in initial uptick in complaints and potential enforcements, but over the long term, as people are aware and educated, we would see a drop in those cases. But that takes time to pull all that together and to do the outreach. So we've had that team together again for a couple of years now.
I add that, looking at that lens of the violation, but looking at the lens of complaints, but the public, I mean, it is important. We absolutely see complaints today because the setback difference. Now, some of those complaints may be due to a legal term, but it's significant. And our staff, in particular, in office, well, the Wilmington region, in particular, county was particular area where it's a high growth area. And we respond to this complaint, part of our legal, relative to 500%. It's significant burden for us, and it's something that I think citizens in favor are upset.
Well, because
Correct. No synthetic materials can be burned.
that's what the permit. Now, here's the deal. Back to the- And, that do get it out of you, but your purpose is that. Having burners. But I know the time, we got a bad situation, something, soccer goes back. Went back, go with the down. Of course, I don't know anything. I don't know who did it. When I had a permit. It'd be realistic even.
Sports and. Now, the project. Yeah. That's not budget. of the source emission goal.
I can offer a quick reaction. I think on the stationary source sector, we are delegated an approved program to carry all of those things. That's significant. So responsibilities, a lot of the numbers today, clients, these cover some of that. Mobile source side, there are very few areas where states have authority to put in place reduction measures. Why don't we have? And maybe. But that's what we. A lot of it. So, but most of those federal, or most of those parties maintain. So, really are significant. From here and elsewhere in the U.S., those really all come in. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you all.
All right. Next on the agenda is
Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'll be just brief. I've got four main areas I want to cover, but I think three primary ones for tomorrow's full commission agenda. The one I'll just note is just staffing updates here today. Mark mentioned one of them earlier during his talk. We have a new air quality analysis branch supervisor, Mark Duder, replaces Tom Anderson, longtime employee of our division. Frank, Mark, we can do all this period. Private and public sectors. We also welcome Jeremy Pope, new supervisor from our projects procedures branch in our anti-conflict section, to replace with Joette Stater. He retired in the state service. Joette was a cornerstone in our many years. There are a few people in the United States that know the anti-monitoring regulations of what he did, and so he will be sort of Jeremy in his new role. Will be overseeing the project and see the branch who's formerly environmental in our anti-monitoring. Both of them, there'll be a lot more announcements in terms of staffing changes. Probably the several presentations today. Continuity planning, succession planning is obviously top of mind, top of action. That's all to say.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much. We have two other informational items on the agenda. If you have any questions on it, we have the 1995, and 43 Air Quality Committee and Environmental Commission calendar. This one is the Senate approval. Russell, we get this question. Well, I guess that moves us forward beyond this. I don't have any comments or remarks other than to welcome the members, and I look forward to working with you all. And going forward. With that said, Let's put it in some other comments or questions. Thank you. We are clear. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, the next meeting is September 13th, 2023.
Really did that. On have a conflict.